My name is Jordan Ellis, and the day we buried my father, my sister changed the locks on our family home while I was still at the cemetery, still standing at his grave. She didn't call, she didn't text. She sent her lawyer. He was waiting at the end of the driveway when I pulled up. A man I had never met, holding an envelope with my name on it, wearing the expression of someone doing a job they'd rather not be doing. I took the envelope. Inside was a single page. It said the property had transferred to my sister Victoria under the terms of my father's will, effective immediately upon his death, and that I had 72 hours to collect my personal belongings before the locks would be changed. 72 hours. My father had been in the ground for 4 hours, and Victoria was already a woman with $44 million, a family estate, and a sister she was throwing out into the street. What she didn't know, what not a single person in that driveway knew, was what my father had actually done. And 3 days later, she was on my doorstep begging. Before I tell you what she was begging for, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if stories about loyalty, loss, and the truth that survives even the worst betrayal mean something to you. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one, and I mean that. Now let me take you all the way back, because this story has layers that you need to understand. My father's name was Gerald Ellis. He built things, not metaphorically, literally, with his hands, and then later with his mind and his money, but always with the same fundamental drive to make something that would stand. He started as a contractor in his early 20s, just him and 2 employees, and a truck held together by optimism. By the time I was born, he had 40 people working for him. By the time I was in high school, Ellis Construction and Development was one of the most respected regional developers in the state. He was a self-made man in the complete, unambiguous sense of that phrase. Raised poor, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts and still somehow made every one of his school plays and baseball games. He carried that work ethic forward like it was a sacred object. He did not believe in shortcuts. He did not believe in waiting for things to come to you. He believed in showing up before everyone else, and staying after everyone else, and doing the work with the integrity that made people want to hire you again. He taught me that. He tried to teach Victoria too. But Victoria and I are different in the particular way that siblings from the same parents can be almost entirely different people. I am 3 years younger than Victoria. She's 41 now. I'm 38. We grew up in the same house, sat at the same table, had the same birthday parties and vacations and arguments with our parents. But Victoria grew up believing that the life our father had built was owed to her. Not earned. Owed. She had a way of receiving everything. The car on her 16th birthday, the tuition payments, the capital for her first business venture that didn't quite work out, as though it were finally arriving after a delay, rather than as a gift being offered. She was not ungrateful exactly. She was just unimpressed by everything, including the people giving. Our father saw it. I know he saw it because we talked about it once, just once, in the way that fathers sometimes talk about painful things with the child they trust most. He didn't use the word disappointed. He used the word worried. "I'm worried about your sister," he said. We were at his kitchen table, the summer I was 26, both of us with coffee and the morning paper that he still read in physical form, because he had never trusted the internet to deliver news without an agenda. "She's fine, Dad," I said. "She doesn't understand what this cost," he said, meaning the business, the house, everything. "She sees what it is. She doesn't see what it took." I nodded. "You understand," he said. He said it simply, without loading it with more than it carried. Just a fact. He was right. I did understand, because I had been there. When I was 22, fresh out of a business administration degree that I had partially funded myself through part-time work, and that my father had matched dollar for dollar as a gesture of partnership rather than charity, I had gone to work for Ellis Construction. Not in a corner office. In the field. My father had insisted on it. 6 months on job sites before I sat at a desk, learning the physical language of what we built, how concrete was poured, how steel was measured and cut, how a foundation had to be right or nothing built on top of it would hold. I wore steel-toed boots for 6 months, and I learned everything. Then I came inside. I started in project coordination, moved to development planning. By 27, I was running our residential division. By 30, I was COO, overseeing everything operationally while my father retained the title of CEO and the relationships he had spent 30 years building. We were a team, a real one, the kind that doesn't need to perform its dynamic because it just is. He would come into my office in the mornings, always a knock first, which I loved about him. He never stopped knocking even when it was his own building, and we would go through the week together. Problems, solutions, opportunities. He trusted my judgment on the operations side completely. I trusted his instincts on relationships and long-term positioning completely. We had different strengths, and we knew it, and we leveraged both. Victoria, in those years, was doing something adjacent to the business world. A consulting role at a firm that our father knew the principal of, arranged through a phone call that I suspected cost him more than he said. She did that for 4 years, and then started a lifestyle company that our father invested in, significantly, more than I knew at the time, that generated buzz without generating much profit. She and I were polite with each other in the way of siblings who exist at a careful distance, not hostile, not close. 2 people who occupied the same family context, and managed that with courtesy. She came to the company Christmas party every year. She sat at the family table at business dinners when it was expected. She posted about our father on his birthday and Father's Day, with captions that were warm and photographically curated. She did not come to the job sites. She did not knock on my office door. She did not, as far as I ever knew, ask our father what it cost. My father had his first cardiac event at 67. I was at a site meeting when his assistant called. I drove to the hospital with my hands on the wheel and something very cold in my chest. He recovered. Stents. Medications. A dietary overhaul that he complied with more than he complained about, which told me he had been frightened in a way he wouldn't say directly. After the cardiac event, he started talking about the future more deliberately, not morbidly, practically. The way he talked about everything. He had conversations with his attorney. He had conversations with his financial advisors. He had conversations with me about the business, about what it needed, who it needed, what the structure of leadership should look like going forward. He did not tell me what was in his will. I didn't ask. That felt like a line I didn't want to cross. Victoria visited more frequently after the cardiac event. She called more. She came to Sunday dinners that she had previously been too busy for. I noticed this. I did not say anything about it. People show up for parents for all kinds of reasons, and not all of them are calculated. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. My father had a second cardiac event at 69. He recovered again, but differently, slower, more aware of what his body was telling him. I want to make sure everything is in order, he told me. We were at the hospital, the day before he was discharged. He was in the bed, and I was in the chair beside it, and the afternoon light was coming through the window at an angle that made the room look quieter than it was. Everything is in order, I said. The business is running well. The team is strong. I mean everything, he said. He looked at me for a long moment. There are some things I want you to know, but I'd rather tell you at the right moment than in a hospital room. Okay, I said. Just trust me, he said. I did. I always had. He died 8 months later, not of his heart, in the end. A stroke. Fast and without warning on a Thursday morning. He was at his kitchen table with his coffee and his physical newspaper, and then he wasn't. I got the call at 7:15 a.m. I want to tell you what that felt like, but I don't think language holds it. I think anyone who has lost a parent knows the specific quality of that moment, the way the world realigns itself into before and after in the space of a sentence, and how nothing on the other side of that sentence looks quite the same. I drove to the hospital, though I knew when I left the house that it was already past the point where driving fast mattered. Victoria was in the waiting room when I arrived. We held each other, briefly, in the way of siblings in shock. Whatever complicated things existed between us dissolved for those first hours into simple, shared grief. He was our father. He was gone. And we didn't know yet what was about to happen. The will reading was 3 days after the funeral. His attorney's office, a conference room with a long table and afternoon light, and the specific atmosphere of a place where families are regularly reshaped by documents. Victoria's husband, Martin, was there. A man who had always reminded me slightly of someone waiting for a bus. patient, present, without any particular energy of his own. My partner at the time, a woman named Grace, held my hand under the table. The attorney's name was Robert Carmichael. He had been my father's attorney for 22 years. He was in his 60s, measured, with the particular quality of a man who knows things and has learned to hold them without expression until the appropriate moment. He read through the preliminary sections, standard items, charitable donations to 3 organizations my father had supported for years, bequests to several longtime employees that made me feel proud of my father all over again, personal items distributed with specific intentionality, his watch to a nephew, his library to the local historical society, his tools, his actual physical tools from when he started, to a trade apprenticeship program. Then he got to the main assets, the family residence and all personal property therein, Robert read, as well as the liquid assets and investments held in accounts numbered, and he read a series of account numbers, totaling approximately $44 million, are left in their entirety to Victoria Ann Ellis. The room was very quiet. I heard Grace's breath. I did not look at Victoria. Robert continued reading. To my daughter, Jordan Michelle Ellis, I leave the following. I waited. The room waited. I leave you what I always meant to leave you. Robert read. You'll find the letter in the blue envelope. That was it. Letter in a blue envelope. While Victoria had $44 million and the family home. The silence in that room was very large. Martin put his hand over Victoria's, which I noticed. Victoria did not look at me. I looked at Robert. He was already reaching into his briefcase. He produced an envelope. Blue, my name on the front in my father's handwriting. He slid it across the table to me. Victoria finally looked at me. Something was in her face that I had not expected to see there. Not triumph. Something more complicated. Something that looked, if I was reading it right, like the expression of a person waiting for a reaction they're not sure they deserve. I picked up the envelope. I put it in my jacket pocket. Thank you, Robert, I said. I stood up. Grace stood up beside me. Jordan, Victoria said. Not today, I said, quietly, without anger. Not today, Victoria. I walked out of the conference room. I sat in the car for a long time before I opened the envelope. Grace sat beside me. She said nothing. She understood that this moment required exactly nothing from her except presence, and she gave me that completely. I opened the envelope. My father's handwriting, neat and unhurried, the way he did everything. Jordan, it began. If you're reading this, then what I planned has happened, which means we never had the conversation I intended to have with you before the end. I'm sorry for that. I know how you'll feel sitting in Robert's office. I know what it looked like. I need you to understand what it is. Your sister needs the money more than you do, not because she's worth more, because she has built her life on foundations that will not hold without intervention, and the intervention is going to cost. Martin's business has debts that Victoria doesn't fully know about. Her lifestyle company has been running at a loss for 3 years. She is in a position that her pride has not allowed her to tell you or me. The $44 million will help, some of it. The rest will teach her what I was never able to. You don't need it, not because I think less of you, because I gave you the thing that is worth more than $44 million. I gave you Ellis Construction. The transfer of the company is in a separate legal instrument that Robert has held in trust. You are already the sole owner of Ellis Construction and Development as of the date of my death. The company is currently valued at between $60 and $75 million. The operational infrastructure is yours. It has been effectively yours for years. The client relationships know you. The team follows you. I gave you the living thing. I gave Victoria the money because money runs out. I gave you the company because companies, run by the right people, do not. One more thing. In the storage unit on Marcellus Street, you have the key. It's the small brass one on the ring I gave you for your birthday 3 years ago. I know you thought it was for the lake house. There is a box. Everything you need is in that box. Not just for the company. For the conversation you're going to need to have with your sister. When you're ready. Not before. I love you more than these pages can hold, Dad. I sat in the car. Grace was still silent. I folded the letter along its original creases and put it back in the blue envelope and the envelope back in my jacket pocket. What does it say? Grace finally asked. I looked out the windshield at the parking garage wall. It says he knew what he was doing, I said. She reached over and took my hand. We sat there for a while longer, and then she said, quietly, "What do you want to do first?" "I want to find the storage unit," I said. I hadn't gone home yet. I hadn't collected any belongings. I was operating on the particular focused calm that sometimes descends in crisis, where the grief is present but located at a slight distance from the functioning mind, and the functioning mind is doing what it needs to do. The storage unit on Marcellus Street was a facility I had driven past 100 times without registering. Ordinary. Climate-controlled. My father had apparently been renting a unit there for over 6 years. I found the brass key exactly where he'd said it was, on a ring with 2 others that I had believed opened the lake house and a property I'd thought was sold. The unit was small, organized, because everything my father did was organized. Shelving on both sides. Labeled boxes stacked neatly. In the center of the right-hand shelf was a box with my name on it in his handwriting. I took it out. I carried it to my car. I drove to Grace's apartment, which was now where I was going to be staying given the 72-hour notice, and I sat at her kitchen table and I opened the box. It took me approximately 3 hours to go through everything. By the end, I understood several things. The first thing, my father had been tracking Victoria and Martin's financial situation with considerably more precision than anyone knew. There were documents, neatly filed, dated, that showed the complete picture of the debt Martin had accumulated through a series of failed ventures, the extent to which Victoria's company had been sustained by our father's quiet infusions of capital, and the current state of both. The total debt picture was significant, not devastating, but requiring. The second thing, the transfer of Ellis Construction was documented completely. Not just the legal transfer. The entire history of my contribution to the company's value over 16 years was documented in a way that was clearly prepared for a specific purpose. A timeline of decisions I had made, their outcomes, the measurable increase in company value attributable to those decisions. My father had been building a case for 16 years. A case that demonstrated that the company's current value was substantially my creation as much as his. The third thing, and this was the one that sat with me longest, there was a sealed envelope at the bottom of the box addressed to Robert Carmichael with a date on it. A date 6 months in the future. And a note on top in my father's handwriting, open only after Jordan has opened this box. Robert has instructions. He's waiting for your call. I stared at that envelope for a while. Then I called Robert. He answered on the second ring. "I've opened the box," I said. "I've been waiting for your call," he said. "Your father asked me to give you 1 week before we discussed what's in the sealed envelope. He thought you'd need the week. What's in it?" I asked. "Jordan," he said gently, "I think you should trust your father's instincts on this one." I did. I gave myself the week. The week was harder than I expected. Not because of the external things. I was staying with Grace. The company was running as it always ran. Because I was already the operational spine of it, there were no emergencies. The hardness was internal. I was grieving. And grief doesn't wait for convenient timing. I cried at unpredictable moments. In the shower, once driving to a job site, pulled over on the highway because I suddenly couldn't see clearly enough to drive. I cried because he was gone, and I missed him. And the sharpness of that loss, didn't know anything about documents and legal transfers and the business he had handed me. He was my father, and he was gone. I also, in that week, heard from Victoria. She called on the 2nd day. I didn't answer. She called on the 4th day. I didn't answer. On the 5th day, she left a voicemail. Her voice was different than I expected. Not imperious, not demanding, something smaller. "Jordan, I know you're not picking up, and I understand. I need you to know that I didn't know. About what Dad left. I didn't know until Robert told me after the reading, and even then I didn't know about the company transfer. I want to talk, when you're ready. I know you might not be ready." A pause. "I'm sorry about the house. The notice. Martin arranged that, and I should have stopped it, and I didn't, and that was wrong." I listened to the voicemail 3 times. Then I called Robert. "I'm ready," I said. The sealed envelope, it turned out, contained a document that my father had never mentioned to anyone. A codicil, a legal amendment to the will, that had been prepared and signed and witnessed, held in trust with Robert, to be opened and activated only upon my request after reading the letter in the box. I read it with Robert across the table from me. It was extraordinary. My father had established a structure, a holding company, already incorporated, already funded with a sum drawn from his estate before the remaining assets transferred to Victoria, that was specifically designed for one purpose: Victoria's company. The lifestyle brand that had been bleeding money for 3 years. My father had created a vehicle through which Ellis Construction could acquire a controlling stake in Victoria's company, stabilize its operations, inject professional management, and position it for actual profitability. The vehicle required my approval to activate, only mine. I was the one who decided whether to save my sister's company. He had built the mechanism. He had funded it. He had structured it legally and financially, and he had made me the key. I sat with that for a very long time. He thought of everything, I said. Robert looked at me over his glasses. Your father thought of most things, he said. This is one of the more elegant structures I've seen him build. I looked at the document. He wanted me to choose, I said. He wanted you to have the choice, Robert said carefully. He believed you would make the right one, but he was adamant that it be yours. I thought about my father at the kitchen table 23 years ago, telling me he was worried about Victoria, about what this cost, about whether she understood. He had spent decades worrying about her. In the end, he had left the answer to the worry in my hands. I folded the document and handed it back to Robert. I need a few days, I said. Take whatever you need, he said. I called Victoria on my way out of his office. She answered on the first ring. Jordan, she said. Can we have dinner? I said. Tonight. Just us. A pause. Yes, she said. Wherever you want. We met at a restaurant that had been our father's favorite, a family-run Italian place that had been in the same location for 30 years, and had served the same breadbasket recipe for all 30 of them. Victoria was there when I arrived. She looked like herself and not like herself. The exterior was maintained, the hair and the clothes exactly as always, but something underneath was different. Something that looked like a woman who had been alone with a truth she'd been managing for a while. We ordered. We talked around the edges for a few minutes, how she was sleeping, how the arrangements had gone, the small logistics of grief. Then she put her fork down. I know about the company transfer, she said. Robert told me the day after you called him. He said you should know that I know. He looked at the table. Dad gave you the company. He did, I said. It's worth more than what I got, she said. It is, I said. He knew that, she said. He did, I said. A long pause. He also knew, I said, about Martin's debt and about your company's financials. Something moved across her face. Not surprise. The particular movement of a face when a secret it has been holding becomes visible. He knew, she said quietly. It was not a question. He knew, I said, for a while. She picked up her wine glass and held it without drinking. I should have told him, she said. I kept thinking I could fix it, that Martin would turn it around, that the brand would find its footing, that I wouldn't have to go to Dad and... She stopped. Her jaw tightened. I was too proud to tell him. I know, I said. He solved it anyway, she said. He tried to, I said. There's a mechanism, a structure he built. Through the company. It could stabilize your business, give it real management and real capital and a real shot. I paused. I have to decide whether to activate it. Victoria looked at me. Fully looked at me for the first time in years. Not the careful peripheral awareness of two people maintaining polite distance. Actually looked. You don't have to, she said. I know I don't have the right to ask you. No, I said. You don't. She accepted that without deflecting. The house, she said. The notice. I should have called you. I should have talked to you before Martin, Victoria, I said. Let me ask you something. And I want you to answer honestly. She waited. What did you think when you found out what the will said at the reading? What was your first thought? She looked at her glass. A long pause. My first thought, she said slowly, was relief. She said the word like it cost her something, because I've been terrified for 8 months about the debt and the company and the whole picture. And for 1 second, Robert read those numbers. I thought, okay, we're okay. We can fix it. She paused. And then I thought about your face. And I knew what it looked like from where you were sitting. She looked up. And I felt sick. Did you know about the company transfer? I asked. No, she said. Swear to you. I didn't know. I would have. She stopped. You would have what? I said. She was quiet for a moment. I would have talked to you, she said. If I'd known. I would have talked to you first. I looked at my sister across the table. I thought about my father, his coffee and his newspaper, his worry about her, his watch given to a nephew, his tools given to apprentices, his company given to me. I thought about the box on the shelf in the storage unit with my name on it. He had known what he was doing, every piece of it. The mechanism requires my decision, I said. But Dad structured it so that the acquisition of your company would give you a seat on the board. It's not a takeover, it's a partnership. You keep creative control. You get operational support. You get the capital to actually make it work. I paused. It's what he would have offered you himself if you'd gone to him. Victoria's eyes filled up. She didn't look away. He would have done it, she said. If I'd asked. He did it anyway, I said, without being asked. Because he was your father. She pressed her lips together. The restaurant moved around us. Plates and voices and the ordinary human noise of people having dinner. And we sat in it as two daughters who had just lost the same man and found out what he had left each of them. Victoria, I said, I'm going to activate the mechanism. She exhaled like she'd been holding something for months. Not because you deserve it after the house and the 72 hours and the lawyer in the driveway, I said. Because Dad built something here. He left it to me to complete. And I'm not going to let it sit in a box. Jordan, but there are conditions, I said. Non-negotiable ones. She nodded. Martin's debts get restructured through the proper process, transparently. I'm not going to have the company expose itself to liability we can't see. Agreed, she said. You come into the company properly. I'm not saving a company you're not willing to actually run. You sit on the board. You come to meetings. You learn what this costs. She was quiet for a moment. That's what he said, she said softly. Almost exactly. You know what it costs. He said that to you? I said. Years ago, she said. I didn't understand it then. She looked at me. I think I do now. Agreed? I said. Agreed, she said. We were quiet for a moment. There's one more thing, I said. She waited. You owe me an apology. Not a voicemail. A real one. Sitting here. She looked at me across the table. And she gave it to me. Not the performed version. Not the one that manages the situation. The real one. That took several sentences and a voice that wasn't quite steady and eyes that didn't look away once. I listened to all of it. And then I said, okay. Just that. And we ate our dinner. The acquisition process took 4 months. Robert and Sylvia and the business team worked through it with the thoroughness that my father would have expected. Every number verified. Every liability documented. Every structure built correctly so it would hold what was put on top of it. Martin's business situation was worse than even my father's documents had shown. He and Victoria had a very difficult period of time during those months. I don't know the full details because it was not mine to know. What I know is that they came through it. Different, but through it. Victoria came to the company offices for the first time in those 4 months. Not for a tour. For a board meeting. She sat at the long table in the conference room. The same table where my father and I had sat for so many years of morning meetings. And she was prepared. She had done the work of preparation, which I had learned to look for as the signal that distinguished people who were serious from people who were performing seriousness. She asked good questions. Sharp ones. I found myself in the middle of the 3rd meeting thinking, there she is. There's the person our father always believed was in there. She caught me looking. What? She said. Nothing, I said. You're good at this. She looked slightly surprised. Then she looked back at her papers. I had a good teacher, she said, even if I didn't appreciate the lessons when they were being taught. The first anniversary of my father's death was a Thursday. I went to the cemetery in the morning. Alone. I brought his favorite coffee, black, no sugar, the particular brand he'd ordered for 20 years, in a thermos, and I poured a little of it on the ground beside his headstone. which I was aware was not a conventional thing to do and which also felt completely right. I sat on the ground beside the stone. I activated it, I said to him. You knew I would, didn't you? The morning was quiet. Birds. She's actually good, Dad, when she applies herself. She's actually really good. I paused. You knew that too. I sat there for a while. I miss you at the morning meetings, I said. The knock on the door. I still expect it sometimes, and then I remember. It takes a minute. Every time. I stayed until the coffee was gone. Then I went to the office. And I knocked on the door of the new office 2, down from mine. The one with a brass nameplate on the door that said Victoria Ellis, Board Director, 3 times. Always 3. She looked up. Morning meeting, I said. She picked up her notebook. And we went to work. Here is what I want to leave with you. My father did not give me $44 million. He gave me something that has generated, in the 18 months since his death, more than that in company valuation growth, more in the work that I love, more in the team that is doing what he built it to do. He gave me the living thing. And then he made me the keeper of the mechanism that would determine whether the rest of the family survived what came next. People hear this story and they think, how could he do that? How could he leave one daughter so much more than the other, even in a disguised way? But that is not what he did. He left each of us exactly what we needed. Victoria needed capital. She needed a foundation under a structure that was built on sand. I needed authority. I needed the formal recognition of what I had been building for 16 years. I needed the company in my name so that the work was permanently and unambiguously mine. He knew us. He knew us better than we knew each other. Better perhaps than we knew ourselves. And he made the hardest part, the part that required grace and forgiveness and the willingness to see someone clearly and help them anyway, he made that part mine. Because he knew I could do it. Not because I was the better daughter. Because I was the one who had learned what things cost. That is the lesson. Not revenge. Not triumph. Not the satisfaction of being the one who got more. The lesson is this. Sometimes the people who shaped us know things we don't know about ourselves. And sometimes the hardest part of honoring them is not accepting what they gave us. It's deciding what to do with it. My father gave me a company and a mechanism and a sealed envelope and a box full of everything I needed. He gave me the choice. And he trusted me. I spent my whole life trying to deserve that trust. I think I always did. And I think if you've spent your whole life trying to deserve someone's belief in you, you probably do too. What is the thing sitting in your box? Whatever it is, you were trusted with it for a reason. Open it. Get to work.